Have you ever made a mistake so terrible you'd do anything to fix it? Imagine that, but 100 times worse. That's where our story begins, with the greatest hero Greece has ever known, Hercules. But at this moment, he's not a hero. He's a broken man, haunted by a shadow that follows him everywhere. In a fit of madness, a curse sent by a jealous goddess, Hercules had committed an unthinkable act, one that stained his hands and soul. Desperate for redemption, he traveled to the sacred oracle of Delphi, a place where the gods spoke to mortals. He prayed for a path to wash away his guilt, a penance, no matter how difficult. The oracle's words were cryptic, but clear. Serve your cousin, King Eurystheus of Mycenae, for 12 years. Complete any 10 labors, he demands, and your soul will be cleansed. Hercules, with a heavy heart but a sliver of hope, agreed. Now, King Eurystheus was not a brave or noble king. He was a coward, deeply jealous and terrified of Hercules' immense strength and growing fame. When Hercules arrived at his court, Eurystheus saw not a cousin seeking atonement, but a threat to his throne. His mind raced, searching for a task so impossible, so deadly, that it would surely be the end of Hercules. And then he found it. His first command was spoken with a sneer. "Go to the lands of Nemea," he ordered, "and bring me the skin of the Nemean lion." This wasn't just any lion. It was a monstrous beast, a terror that stalked the countryside. Legends whispered it was the offspring of monsters, its hide so thick it was impervious to any weapon. It was a death sentence, and everyone in the court knew it. Hercules, however, accepted without hesitation. This was the first step on his long road to redemption. On his way to Nemea, Hercules passed through a small town and met a humble shepherd named Melorchus. The old man was about to offer a sacrifice to the gods to protect his flock from the very lion. Hercules was sent to kill. Seeing the hero, Melorchus offered to make the sacrifice for Hercules' safe return instead. But Hercules stopped him. "Wait," he said. "Hold your sacrifice for 30 days. If I return with the lion's skin, we will offer it to Zeus, king of the gods, in celebration. If I do not return by then, offer it to me as a hero fallen in battle." A 30-day bet for his own life. The clock was ticking. Arriving in Nemea was like stepping into a land of ghosts. The once thriving fields were barren, the villages eerily silent. Fear was a thick fog that choked the air. The locals who hadn't fled hid behind locked doors, their eyes filled with a desperate terror. They told Hercules stories of the beast, a creature larger than any bull, with claws that could shred armor, and a roar that shook the very hills. They pointed him in the direction of the lion's last known sighting, their gestures a mix of warning and hopeless prayer. Hercules, armed with his trusty bow and a club he carved from an olive tree, set off into the desolate landscape, the silence broken only by the crunch of his own footsteps. He searched for days, following a trail of destruction. Uprooted trees, massive paw prints sunk deep into the earth, and the scattered bones of livestock were grim signposts, leading him toward his quarry. Finally, he saw it. Perched on a rocky outcrop, its golden fur shimmering like a mirage under the sun, was the Nemea lion. It was more magnificent and terrifying than any story had described. It was a monster of pure muscle and rage, a living engine of destruction. Without a moment's hesitation, Hercules drew his bow. He was the finest archer in all of Greece, his arrows known to fly truer than any other. He took a deep breath, aimed for the beast's heart, and let the arrow fly. It soared through the air and struck the lion's flank with a loud thwack. But instead of piercing its flesh, the arrow simply bounced off, clattering harmlessly to the rocks below. The lion turned its massive head, its eyes like molten gold, and let out a roar that vibrated through Hercules' very bones. It wasn't a roar of pain, but of annoyance. Undeterred, Hercules knocked another arrow, and another. Each one met the same fate, bouncing off the lion's impenetrable hide as if it were made of solid bronze. The lion was now fully aware of the hunter, and it was angry. Realizing his arrows were useless, Hercules threw down his bow and drew his massive bronze sword, a gift from the gods. He charged forward, a battle cry on his lips, and swung the heavy blade with all his might against the lion's neck. The impact was jarring. A sound like metal striking stone rang out, and the sword, a weapon that had cleaved through armies, bent into a useless arc. The lion wasn't even scratched. It swiped a massive paw, and Hercules barely dodged, the claws tearing through the air where he had just stood. Now he understood. This wasn't a hunt. No weapon forged by man or god could harm this creature. This would have to be a battle of a different kind. As the lion lunged again, Hercules retreated, using his agility to evade the furious onslaught. He needed a new plan. He had to get the beast away from this open ground, somewhere he could control the fight. He began to run, not away in fear, but as a strategic retreat, luring the enraged monster after him. The chase was on, a desperate dance between hero and monster across the rocky hills of Hercules led the lion on a grueling chase, his powerful legs eating up the ground. He remembered the locals mentioning the lion's lair, a cave that supposedly ran straight through a mountain. He gambled that the creature would retreat to its home ground when tired. After a long pursuit, his guess proved right. The panting lion, frustrated and furious, bounded away and disappeared into a dark opening in the side of a cliff. Hercules followed cautiously and found the entrance to a large cave. As he explored the area, he discovered a second, smaller opening on the other side. This was his chance. He gathered all his strength and began piling massive boulders, heaving rocks that a dozen normal men couldn't move, and sealed the smaller exit completely. There would be no escape, not for the lion and not for him. He then returned to the main entrance, his heart pounding not with fear, but with primal adrenaline. He cast aside his useless bent sword and his heavy club. He was going in with the only weapons he had left that might make a difference. His bare hands, he plunged into the darkness of the cave. The air was thick with the smell of blood and damp earth. His eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, and he saw them, two glowing embers in the back of the cavern, reflecting the faint light from the entrance. The lion was waiting. A low growl rumbled from the darkness, a sound that promised a violent end. There were no more tricks, no more strategies. This was it. A primal contest of strength against strength, will against will. With a deafening roar, the lion sprang from the shadows. Hercules met the charge head-on. It wasn't a fight, it was a collision. The two figures, hero and monster, became a single, thrashing entity in the suffocating darkness of the cave. Claws raked at Hercules, but he twisted and turned, using his skill as a wrestler to stay out of their deadliest reach. The lion's jaws, powerful enough to crush bone, snapped inches from his face. The noise was a terrifying symphony of snarls, growls, and the grunts of immense effort. Hercules felt the lion's hot breath on his skin, the sheer power of the beast threatening to overwhelm him. But the hero's resolve was as impenetrable as the lion's hide. He was fighting for more than his life. He was fighting for his soul. He managed to get a grip, wrapping his powerful arms around the beast's thick, muscular neck. The lion thrashed wildly, its immense weight and power, a brutal force trying to throw him off. But Hercules held on. This was his one chance. He squeezed his biceps, legendary for their size and strength, bulged like boulders. He put every ounce of his divine power, every bit of his grief and his rage and his desperate need for redemption, into that single act. The lion struggled, its powerful lungs gasping for air. The fight seemed to last an eternity. It was a battle of endurance, of pure brute force. Slowly, agonizingly, the monster's struggles began to weaken. The thrashing lessened, the growls turned to wheezing gasps. Hercules held on, his grip like iron, until finally the great beast went limp. Silence descended upon the cave. In the darkness, against all odds, Hercules had done the impossible. He had strangled the unkillable Nemean lion. Exhausted but victorious, Hercules dragged the massive carcass out of the cave and into the sunlight. His first labor was complete. But his task wasn't just to kill the lion. It was to bring back its skin. He tried to skin the beast with his knife, but the blade skidded uselessly off the golden hide. He tried using a sharp rock, then the tip of a broken spear. Nothing worked. The hide that had protected the lion so well in life was just as impenetrable in death. How could he complete the labor? As he sat there, contemplating his frustrating dilemma, an idea sparked in his mind. What was the one thing sharp enough to cut through this hide? He looked down at the lion's massive paw. Its own claws were as long and sharp as daggers. It was a clever, if gruesome, solution. Using one of the lion's own razor-sharp claws as a tool, Hercules was finally able to slice through the magical hide and skin the beast. He slung the incredible pelt over his shoulders. The lion's head formed a fearsome helmet, its golden skin a magnificent, impenetrable cloak. He began the journey back to Mycenae, arriving just as the 30th day was dawning. He kept his promise to when King Eurystheus saw Hercules approaching, not dead as he'd hoped, but alive and wearing the skin of the monster as a trophy. He shrieked in terror. The sight of the lion's head, its jaws agape over Hercules' own, sent the cowardly king scrambling to hide inside a large bronze storage jar. He refused to come out, instead shouting his orders from the safety of his hiding spot. From that day on, he forbade Hercules from ever entering the city again. All future proof of his labors was to be presented outside the gates, but it didn't matter. The first labor was complete. Hercules had faced an impossible task, and won not just with strength, but with cleverness and unbreakable will. The legend of Hercules, the hero who wore the skin of an unkillable monster, began to spread across the land. This victory was more than just the start of his penance. It was the forging of a myth. He had faced death and emerged stronger, now protected by the very beast that was meant to destroy him. But this was only the beginning. 11 more impossible tasks awaited. Thanks for watching our dive into the world of mythology. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of heroes, gods, and monsters. Let us know in the comments which myth you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.